Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Universal Furniture. Welcome to the Learning Center. We've had a number of events here in this space throughout the week, kind of touching on a number of subjects. And I was joking around with Rachel that nothing gets a crowd like back office, like accounting or software, or just something like really nitty gritty like that. So. But we actually record all of these, so if there's something that you did sign up for that you missed, if there's something that you wanted to see but maybe couldn't make it, if you signed up for one, you're going to get an email with all of them, so congratulations. And that will happen in about a week, so we'll edit those down and make those available for you. So, and we have a full slate of events tomorrow as well, including a party tomorrow afternoon, so be sure to check that out. If you've not been to Universal before, we definitely would encourage you to see and explore our showroom. It's quite large, 115,000 square feet. We're a whole home resource. We have a new outdoor collection on floor 3, 2 new indoor collections on floor 2, and the first floor, which we're on here, features our special order upholstery, which now offers COM. And then we also have our Designer's Lounge, which has some fun activations, including a little get-together, meet and greet, cocktail and app in the Designer's Lounge. And we actually have a little pottery pop-up happening there. So that's going to be right after this, following the event. The folks are going to make that available for you from Studio Designer, just in the Designer's Lounge. So it's going to be just out to your left. If you want to explore the rest of the showroom and see all that we have to offer, just check in at the front desk. I can also give you a scanner, and you can scan all the products to your heart's content of anything you like, and you'll get an email to remember what you saw. So I'm going to hand it over to Rachel Wagman, and she is from Studio Designer, and she will introduce this lovely panel, and hopefully you guys will be entertained and educated. I'm sure you will. And again, please join us in the Designer's Lounge afterwards for a cocktail. So thank you again.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much for being here, and thank you to Universal for having us and for creating this wonderful space to have the nitty-gritty and fun conversations like this one. I'm Rachel Wagman. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Studio Designer. If you're not familiar with Studio, we are the industry's leading project management, time billing, and accounting platform made for you, interior designers. Over 15,000 designers now use Studio to power their firm operations and manage all the aspects of the back end of their business. So let's dig into our topic today, purchasing power, how to maximize your firm's potential with the best digital tools. I'd love to introduce you to our wonderful panel, and actually they're going to introduce themselves, so I'll pass it off to you, Julia.
Hi, everyone. Oh. My name is Julia Nikishina. I own New Age Financial Consulting. We are a full-service accounting firm that specializes only in interior designers.
I'm Keith Granet, the CEO of Studio Designer, the author of Business of Design. And I've been working with designers for the last 30 years in consulting in the back end of their business.
Hi, I'm Valerie Lambert. I am the founder of Valia Procurement. We do full-service procurement services based out of Philadelphia and throughout the country.
I'm Kaitlyn Murphy. I work for Marguerite Rodgers Interior Design, which is based in Philadelphia, and we are a high-end residential firm. And we also do some hospitality as well.
Great, thanks. So we are all here because we love design and we're inspired to build a career in a creative space. But even the best, most creative ideas only can live in our heads unless we actually have the tools and resources to bring those ideas to life. So let's actually talk about how to bring some of those great ideas to life with some amazing tools and processes to source products and place orders. So Kaitlyn, I'm going to have you start. What have you found to be the most efficient way to place and track orders?
So I've definitely built a system that I use to place and track orders. There's colors that I use in my system to let anyone in the firm know at what point of the process this item is at. So for instance, if I've sent it to the client, I may make it blue. If the client has approved it, I may make it yellow. And then once I've actually ordered it, it'll be green, and so on. So not only is it really easy for people to follow, but anyone in the firm can sort of pick up where I left off and know what needs to be ordered. It's also really easy to then sort. So if I have like a chance, I can make sure I'm sorting through my items to see what I need to order that week. I also make sure that all of my correspondence has like the list of proposals or purchase orders, so it's really easy to constantly be tracking those in your emails. And then utilizing a bunch of dates. So for instance, when something's been acknowledged, then if it's an 8-week lead time, I'm putting in that estimated shipping date. And these are all things that you can constantly be sorting in the expediting process to make sure you're staying on top of everything.
Can I piggyback on that? Okay. So we work with a lot of clients, and we're consistently asking or really telling them what is, right, high level, what is their process, and what software are they using, and what digital tools are they using to help them narrow down the ordering process from beginning to end, because that is where you lose all of your efficiencies and all of your money, right, and all of your time. And so whether you're in Studio Designer or whether you're in another software, right, you should still have a very straightforward and easy, I would say easy process for anyone in the firm to follow from point A to point Z to get the product from where it needs to go, because that's what's going to keep that margin that you're making within the firm.
I will piggyback on that. So I would say in regards to placing orders, I'm a big fan of once a client payment is received, that you are going through that list of items that you've just collected funds on, utilizing that list to create all of your purchase orders. From there, I like to have purchase orders approved by a director, the principal of the firm, to make sure that all the information is correct, and then emailing out those purchase orders. So you're starting a strand of communication with your vendor that you can utilize throughout the order process, right? So as you're getting tracking and all of the other information that you're looking for throughout the purchase process, you have it all in one string that's easy to search through your email. And also utilizing the billing that went to your client so that you're checking off all of the items to make sure that no one order slips through the cracks.
That's great. We just talked a lot about kind of like internal processes within our firms. We all do our very best to keep things buttoned up within our own teams, but we also know that clients exist. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about, what are some of the challenges that clients have created in the purchasing process? Keith, maybe you can start with that.
I think it's called the internet. So I just do recall a story of a client, this was a couple years ago, where the designer had specified actually a gym floor in this fairly significant house in Beverly Hills, and the client went searching online for the same floor, found it significantly cheaper, and then called the designer in with their whole team and said, we're going to audit every single thing you've done because we don't believe any of your pricing. And the truth is that that designer had a relationship with this installer. The price was higher because it included somebody they could trust, and that the product wasn't priced any more than what it should have been. It's just that it included a well-known installer that they could trust, and so there was nothing wrong, and they did this full audit. But what it ultimately came down to was trust, that the designer, for them to audit every single item that they had purchased, this was like a $40 million house, and they just literally, the relationship sort of fell apart at that point. But it was all because the client decided to do a search on the internet, and we've seen a lot of that. But there's so many facets to that purchase and and those relationships that you build that you have to be able to communicate that with your clients as well. Have you seen other nightmares?
Probably spend the whole time just talking about
Yes,
those.
I think generally speaking, some client nightmares are slow to make decisions, changing your mind all of the time, back and forth sort of things, really delay the project. And then what winds up happening is a client makes a selection, And then they say, well, what do you mean we're not going to meet the install? But I picked my sofa. How come it can't be delivered next week? And so that's a problem that people come up against. And so I try to work with my clients to educate their clients on the ramifications of not making decisions or changing your mind, that yes, your contract was for a 12-month project, but if it took 8 months to pick a wall color, the likelihood is we're not going to meet that deadline.
Also, we did see during the pandemic that because the supply chain was so screwed up that people needed to place those orders in order to deliver anything. And we at Studio could see that the time from proposal to purchase actually got sped up quite a bit because they had to get those orders in because the delays were so long.
Rachel, we learned a tip yesterday, right, where price shopping is so common now, and a participant in the audience actually said that there's a way to fix that by reversing your image.
Yeah, you mirror the image.
Mirror the image,
you
so then
can't
when you're
search it.
sending it to the client can't Google image it to price shop you, which was a great. We were all of us were amazed.
I know. I don't know if the guy is in the audience, but thank you. We'll try that out. I think it's cool.
Of course, everything in their house will look backwards when they get it right.
It's funny. I was wondering that too. I was like, how are people not confused when the product comes in? But maybe he discloses that ahead of time. But it was a really great workaround that he had proposed, so that you can't, right, in theory, then you can't get price shopped. But price shopping is, I think, all trust. And it's understanding the contract and being happy with the design and understanding all of the work that goes through executing the product from beginning to end, because it is incredibly time consuming.
So to piggyback on what Valerie said, as a designer, I'm producing my proposals for my clients, and I think it's really important in the very beginning of a project to really set expectations and understand, so that you're setting yourself up for a good client relationship and having them not really put a wrench in your timelines in the proposal process. So we always like to understand, like, who are the players? Like, are you the one that's going to be writing the check, or is it, your accountant? And can we put your accountant on to this correspondence so that they're always aware of what we're sending to you? And then we also have someone else kind of on our side that's maybe following up with them and saying, have you approved this yet? Can I send the check? We also like to really understand with the way we're going to receive payment. Like, do you want to send us a wire? Do you want to send us a check? Like, are you going to be waiting till the end of each month and sending one check, so that we can really game plan, what we're sending to them? We also try to send proposals that we know that have the longest lead time first, which tend to be, area rugs. So I'll make sure that that's kind of like the first thing that we're selecting, so that we can get that ordered, and then build from there. So that just maintaining that relationship with your client. Also, sometimes you do have to kind of pivot a little bit. Like, if they say they want one proposal a week and you're putting 50 items on it, and then if they see one thing that they're not sure about, now they're holding up the whole 50 items, and you kind of have to pivot, and you're like, all right, we're going to break these down a little bit more, hoping to move things along faster.
Well, we also discussed, just sort of best practices, and one of those things is when you start a project, you actually have an orientation with your client or whoever's making that decision, so that they see what a purchase order looks like, or what a proposal looks like, what our process is, and that there's no surprise when it comes in the mail, or it comes through email or whoever, or the client portal. That you really want them to know what that experience is going to be like, so that they can approve it as quickly as possible.
We have some clients actually that do a great job in terms of every phase of the project. They send their clients a full breakdown of what each phase will look like. So when they're in the purchasing phase, they get a complete write-up of, you're going to be receiving proposals. It's expected you review and pay them if you'd like to begin placing your orders. In the very beginning of the design documentation phase, right, they almost get like a pamphlet. And there's a handful of firms actually in LA that use a secondary software that will automatically, as soon as they're in that phase, it'll send out this generic email, but that client expectations really are met. And I think it's been tremendously helpful.
And I would say also there are firms where I do some of the billing, so I'm actually going to the client first to collect the money before I'm kicking off the purchasing process. And if I know that I have somebody who's slow to pull the trigger on payment, I put a gentle reminder in the body of the email to say, you know, we don't purchase until payment is received. Some of these items are antiques, they're at auction, so prompt payment will ensure delivery of these items as you see them on this proposal.
So to shift gears a little bit, sometimes it's not the client's fault. What are some potential inefficiencies that cause clients' funds to be received, but then purchase orders are not sent in a reasonable amount of time? Do you want to start, Julia?
I think so that's a great question, and so much of that is process, right? And so depending, again, back to the original, I think, statement of what is your internal process, and is it buttoned up, and as soon as client funds come in, what do you do and who does it? And if you don't have a sense of that within the firm, or if you're too busy, I mean, that could certainly be the case, you're going to lose sight of that money, and then not be able to pull the trigger effectively and efficiently. And we talk a lot about review too. Who at the firm is reviewing what? So when client funds come in, whose responsibility is that? When the proposal is paid, whose responsibility is it to review the purchase orders to ensure that there aren't any mistakes being made?
Just out of curiosity, because I've seen this through the years, that when firms tend to get in trouble and they use the funds to keep the firm running.
Super fun problem.
And then it comes time to like ordering the product and they don't have the funds. How have you dealt with that?
Interesting question. We have an anonymous user, anonymous firm, right, who definitely, and there's a handful of them, and you see it and you sort of know, I think from the business side, you could see it happening, and the firm isn't in touch with that. I think, again, it depends on software, right? So if you're using Studio Designer, there are definitely reports that you could be generating on a weekly or monthly basis to understand your true net position. And then how do you actually solve that problem? I mean, you hope for a line of credit, you do balance transfers, but I think if the firm is working with any type of outsourced accounting person or in-house accounting person, they should be communicating that along the way.
But have you found that people actually have separate checking accounts just to handle that? Or do they, if it's all in one operating account?
I think all firms do it differently. I would say it's a really good mixture of 50-50. I'm not necessarily tied to only having or having a purchasing and operating account. Again, if you're utilizing really great software, you're always able to understand what your true vendor balances are and whether they're $700,000 or 1.7, right? If you're setting up the right reports on the back end, you're able to generate that information for yourself very, very quickly and then understand, hopefully, where you are cash-wise.
And I would jump in on that, right? And there's a part of it where everybody's going to potentially have a tight month or what have you, but to really lean into your vendor relationships, to go to your tradesmen who you're sending business all year long, year after year, and say, hey, I'm really sorry, I have a problem, I need this furniture to deliver, can I get you a check next month? And I've been in those positions with clients before, and you'd be surprised how willing the vendors are to support you, given that you're supporting them.
Yeah, you're actually really good at that, right? You're really good at proactively communicating with the vendor to say that I really need the sofa. Can you work with me on these terms? I fronted all this money for whatever the reason is, right? But can you help me? And I do think 9 out of 10 times that they will.
And I also think that it is really helpful to find a core group of, especially tradesmen, which we all know can be challenging currently, that you're doing repeat business with, because you have those really solid relationships. And if you're doing custom sofas on every project, it makes the legwork for you a little bit easier. You know that your upholsterer is equipped to produce a quality product that you've already approved. So it makes the whole process a little more efficient. And then with a COM, you can make it different in every space that you put it in. But you also know that if you're like, hey, Steve, I'm so sorry, I messed up the schedule and I need you to get that wallpaper hung next week, he's going to go to bat for you.
I remember actually meeting with a vendor once who said, I can tell, when somebody needs something in a rush, I go right to the accounts receivable or accounts payable, and I know who pays their bills, and they get the most attention. So if you're great with your vendors, they will treat you the same way.
That actually is a nice transition. Obviously, vendor relationships greatly impact our margins. So what's been your experience with negotiating vendor discounts? Kaitlyn, do you want to start?
Sure. So in general, we don't do too much negotiations, but we're very transparent as far as like our markups are concerned with our clients. So, sometimes they know that, if something is going to be, if our markup's 35% and we're only getting 20% from the vendors, like, we're going to be marking that up over retail. Every now and then, like if we're doing like a very large order, like we'll reach out to the vendor and just say like, listen, we love working with you guys. This is a big order. Like, would you consider, an additional discount for this? And I mean, you'd be surprised how willing they are to negotiate. They want your business. And another example was like, we happened to be ordering from the same manufacturer from a couple different places, like a purchasing agent, a trade-only showroom. Some people were ordering direct, and so that was really kind of creating. It was really taking our volume and spreading it out, which wasn't beneficial to us. But some people really liked working with one. Some people liked working with the others. And then, some were providing a deeper discount to us. So on that project where you really needed that extra margin, you went there. But, ultimately we ended up talking to the vendor directly, and we explained the situation. And we said, hey, listen, like some of these people are giving us a deeper discount than you. If we could give you all of our volume, would you agree to lower the or increase the discount for us? And again, they were willing to, and so we've transitioned all of our business direct with them moving forward.
I also think that sometimes people get confused about volume discount versus being transparent with a client, that you say you're going to mark it up, let's just say 35% off the vendor cost, but in some cases you have this relationship with vendors that it's based upon your entire volume for all your projects that you're giving them business, and that discount is actually meant for you as a firm to go deeper, not for you to pass everything along to your client.
Well, Keith, I have a question for Keith. I do. But so we really like to evaluate how much our firms are spending with vendors, right? So a vendor spend annually for them to understand, should they go to the vendor directly to see if they could get a steeper discount. So working with higher end firms, do you find that that's a viable approach for them, that is something that they should be exploring on at least on an annual basis?
Yeah, I think that if your volume's pretty solid, then people are listening to you because you're committed to them. And we've talked about like stocking dealer relationships and that, where you can get a deeper discount because you have a deeper relationship with the particular vendor, and you could sell it to yourself and then sell it back to the business in a way that you're still giving them, a deal off of retail, but you're getting a deeper discount because of your volume.
Well, in a way, and you and I have a mutual client, but a way to get around that too contractually is if you have a separate entity. So if a separate entity is buying, let's say, antiques and then reselling it to the interior design firm, that's a really great way to make extra margin. I think additionally, there are a lot of interior designers who are opening up smaller storefronts because of the stock and dealer pricing, because it really is allowing them better negotiations with vendor discounts. And it's producing a significant increase to their bottom line. And it doesn't have to be a big storefront. It doesn't have to be a full showroom. But I think for us, it's definitely been a trend across the board, which has been fantastic.
You just have to be careful of inventory. Like, you don't want to carry too much stuff. Right?
Agreed.
Right.
Yes, agreed. Great segue to inventory.
I was going to say, Keith, do you want to talk a little bit about inventory?
So actually, it's something we've been thinking about at Studio, is that, for years I hear from clients that I've got this warehouse or I've got this storage room that's filled with all the stuff that's either been a mistake or I bought it because I knew a client wanted it and they didn't want it. And so one of the things that we've been playing with at Studio is, do we open up a marketplace for all of we have 15,000 users at Studio, and they all pretty much have inventory. If we allowed for that marketplace to be open so it could be designer to designer, shopping from each other, their inventory. It would be a way for you to unload things that you just can't move or don't want to move that other people may need. So, you know, like they say,
Someone's trash is
Is
another
someone's
person's
treasure,
treasure. It's
exactly.
not trash, though. It's just
it's
the
not
wrong
necessarily
color.
trash, but just as a really quick show of hands, if we had a tool like that where you could unload your inventory or shop from other designers, is that of interest? Yes.
I think so many design firms are carrying some portion of inventory, whether that's just a couple $1,000 up to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And some firms are actually really, really good at it. Valerie and I think talk about it often, where there are some principals who love antiquing. Maybe that's the wrong term, but really shopping creatively.
My homemade term.
That's what?
That's my homemade term.
Or Etsying. Maybe that's a. But then their margins on that product is phenomenal, and so if they could also then assist at the same time in the same platform, I mean, that would be fantastic.
And I think, you know, we can see exactly what sits in inventory, and it's like $40 million. I mean, there's a lot of
Long
inventory.
time.
Okay, switching gears again. So we've talked about our clients, our vendors, our teams. So what processes do you have in place that creates the greatest amount of communication within the design team? Julia, maybe you want to speak to kind of your experience with your clients?
So internally, meaning how are they communicating internally?
Sharing information across the design team, especially with folks being all over.
So I think a lot of our clients are definitely in studio designer, actually 100%, but that's not important. And then in addition, I think there are a couple who are also using like an Asana, and Asana is a really helpful tool to make sure that their projects are staying on track. And then I think a last point to sort of higher level point to that question is reports, and right, how are they utilizing all these different reports that hopefully they're getting out of Studio, but again, if they're in another software, it should be able to produce something as well as a communication tool for them to manage any part of the project management. And if they do a good job setting up reports on the back end, they're really able to help that communication move forward within the office. What do you think?
What do I think?
You guys can all
I
talk.
mean, communication's key to everything, for sure.
Yes, so I think whether you're using a software or there are firms who are operating in Excel, to be able to track all of the data for your FF&E purchases in a way that is usable for your team, and then also in a way that you can take all the work you put into what you've already done and reformat it so you can send it to a client if they're nagging you every week. When's my sofa coming? I want to know when my wallpaper is coming. And also to be able to reformat that data again so that you can use it as a communication tool with your receiving warehouse to make sure that if you think that the living room sofa is coming and they think that the study sofa is coming, that everybody gets aligned before that truck gets unpacked on site. In regards to other communication tools, I really am an advocate of a orders at, is what I call it, but a shared email where you're requesting vendors send all of their communication, and this way everybody in the firm has access to it. I know some financial and project management softwares have the ability to house those PDFs for you, and some softwares may not, but this way there's one place. So if I'm unexpectedly out of the office for 6 weeks and someone has to come in behind me, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I can easily share that password, or if we're in an office, obviously we would all have access to that email, so somebody can pick the pieces up really quickly to bridge the gaps.
And accounting too, right? I mean, an orders at email or a receipts at email is a really great organizational tool. I think we recommend it for sure as well, because then everyone, regardless of their location, so again, if you're working with any type of third-party consultant in any capacity, they all have access to the information. And then Studio will house that information on the back end for them as well.
Kaitlyn, you actually had an interesting way of telling your principal that you
Yes,
needed an
I
answer.
do. So whenever I'm creating emails in regards to purchasing, I always put purchasing like in big bold letters first. And so when she's looking at the many emails she gets that day, it sort of pops out to her and she knows to look at that. And then if it's something that she needs to approve, I'm always saying please approve. And then she's even allowed me to put second request if she doesn't answer, and then third request if she doesn't answer. And she is like, when I see that third request, I'm like, I'm reading this email right now. Like, it gets to her. So that is something that's really helpful, just via email internally. And then definitely utilizing reports. The way that you can filter through things makes it so easy. For instance, like, I could filter and say, like, what has a $0 balance on the selling side, but there's a balance on the vendor side. So I know at that point, I've collected all that money, but I haven't paid the vendor yet. So this could be, 3 items that might have slipped through the cracks. So just knowing those types of filters that you can run, and you're not going through, pages and pages and pages, because, sometimes a project could become like 20 pages and you don't necessarily have time in this, maybe 15 minutes that you got between 2 meetings to really go line by line. So if you just have some of these filters set up, you can quickly, get a quick shot of your different projects and see what needs, attention in that very moment.
And Kaitlyn brought up a really good point about looking at vendor balances. So I have seen this several times in my years in this industry, where something gets marked ordered in whatever system it is that you're utilizing, and the vendor balance is showing 100% due. And a designer says, no, I know this is ordered, I'm sure this is ordered, or somebody on my procurement team will say, I know I placed this order. But if you know it's a quick ship fabric, and whatever your system is tells you that that vendor balance is open, for me, that's a red flag. Just because I sent out a PO with a credit card authorization form doesn't mean that it was received by the correct person. Did it go into a spam folder? So I'm constantly monitoring balances for a few things to make sure that my costs are accurate, right? If I've picked up some freight along the way, I want to make sure that I'm passing that along to my client wherever applicable. But also to really be the double, triple check that my item is in production, my fabric is, being shipped.
So the next topic, another one that everyone loves to talk about, is markup. We've mentioned the number 35 a few times, so what do you all think is the average markup is? And how do you ensure that product markup covers the cost of time associated with ordering and expediting? Do you want to start?
I think average markup, they're 35%, right? You threw around that number. I think that's a very attainable goal, and that should be everybody's goal. We definitely still see some 30s for sure. And then depending on category, what are you doing, right? Some of the offshoots would be, how do you handle freight? You're really great at talking about presented price, right? What are you doing with more bespoke pieces? And then categories such as art, antiques, and construction materials, typically, right, 20% I would say is fairly standard.
Yeah, I would say that 35 may be, for very high-end residential projects, it's pretty common. It depends if you're doing big hospitality work, it could be much lower than that because it's volume-based. But I also find that if we hear a lot, if that item costs X, why are you still getting, if I'm buying something that costs $50,000 versus $5,000, why are you getting the same markup? Because you're just picking a piece that costs more money. And we always say, look, it's up to the client to make that final decision. If they don't want it, they don't have to buy it. So we're not forcing you to buy something that's $50,000. But we say that any item that's probably any single item that costs more than, say, 50, we're willing to reduce the percentage because there's just an economy of scale there. When Julia mentions presented price, it's something that I've helped clients with for years, because if you make a lot of custom product, they're not, and you charge them, say, 30% or 35% on all of the material, they're getting something that you've designed that's uniquely theirs, and it doesn't really match the value. So we say, look, if you want us to design something, here's the price. So that sofa's $10,000. And they're like, no, I don't want to spend that much. Fine, we're going to go find something for you. But if you want something I've designed, here's my price. And that price could mean it's a 50% markup or a 100% markup, because again, it's something that's original from you, you've designed, and it's unique. And so that value equates to the value of that product. And I think it's a great way to create more margin for your company if you do a lot of custom pieces.
I think too, I mean, we're typically seeing on custom upholstery is 50 to 50, 45 to 55, with 50 being the standard in terms of markup. And again, it's just another great revenue stream.
Valerie, do you want to talk a little bit about sort of once the item's ordered, and how does markup kind of play the role in like covering the expediting costs and things along those lines?
So I think the way that a lot of firms structure their fees is that they get a design fee up front, whether that be hourly or fixed fee, and then the expectation is that the markup cover the cost of placing those orders and getting them to the install. So before we just even talk about the markup, I think I'm going to say something that a lot of people fight, but it's super important, and that is you need to be diligent in tracking your time. And I sound like a broken record. I tell my clients all the time, you can't understand if you're profitable or how profitable you are if you don't have a sense of how much time things take. You could further go into that data by looking at, okay, well, now we know how much time my team is spending, but what are they spending it on, and am I aligned with that as a principal, right? Is there something broken in our process where something that should take an hour a week, we have 3 people spending 3 hours a week, right? And so from there, with that data, what you can do is you can say, okay, well, we spent this many hours on this project, and our markup was X, or if you bill your purchasing fee as flat, right? To put a dollar value to that time and see where you actually fell out, right? I mean, I don't think that there's anything wrong with using your gut, right? You've been in business for some time, and maybe you really do know, but maybe you don't, and the only way to find out is by really reviewing data. And I recommend that for all projects and all areas of the project, that every project, when it wraps, you look back to say what worked, what didn't work, what could we do better, what was really financially successful in this job, and how can we replicate that in future projects.
And I think if you don't track your hours, then you really don't know how to quote for the next job coming along that's going to be similar. It's like, it's just, okay, I think it's going to be $100,000, but you don't know unless you track those hours.
Yes, and so there's a lot of staff that will give pushback on it, right? And I mean, I'm somebody who I track my time, so I understand, but what I like to educate my clients on is it's muscle memory. So on week 1 and week 2, sure, is it an added thing? Is it like slowing you down in your day-to-day? Maybe, but in a couple of weeks, it's just another part of your process, and the data so outweighs the 5 extra minutes it takes to put it into a software.
Well, and
Well,
go ahead.
I was just say the worst, people are the principals of the firm.
Yes, always.
You can never get their
Yes,
time from
yes.
them.
But it is a great tool, Valerie, right, to understand how are you charging overall. So is the markup enough for expediting time? And then there are firms, and some of us had this conversation earlier, that are still actually able to charge hourly for procurement in addition to markup, right? So much of that is in your contract, and obviously if the client is aligned with it. But we are seeing that at a few firms for sure, that they're able to do both. Or even firms that do a percentage line item on proposals called an administrative fee or even a procurement fee, but that's still above and beyond the margin, the markup and the margin.
Well, you and I have talked about the most successful firms actually cover all their operating expenses through their time billing or their fees, and that the markup is actually profit.
Yes. For any discretionary owner spending.
Yeah.
And so if you actually take that information, what you're billing hourly or fixed fee, and you compare it on your income statement to what your overhead is, that can be really illuminating for somebody who's like, well, not super accountant-y, I got into this and I have a team.
That is an official client term.
And so to be able to understand, like, maybe I'm not billing enough. maybe I shouldn't be buying lunch for my office 5 days a week because this is causing a major delta in between my design fees and my overhead costs.
Yeah, and the most successful firms for sure, right, are definitely understanding the hours associated with everything on interior design time, or if they're architecture and interiors, and then all the time associated with project management and expediting, and really trying to evaluate those buckets, I think, separately.
So we already talked a little bit about kind of setting the standard of ways of working with your clients at the start of a project. And I love Keith's kind of operating manual, or what term did you use?
Orientation.
Orientation guide. I love that. And one of the things that we've seen firms articulate around is freight. So how do you all manage client expectations relating to estimated freight costs and just communicating the cost of freight along the way as well? Kaitlyn, I remember you had something interesting to share.
Yeah, so when we work with clients, we almost always start off with a budget that they, we get their approval on. Sometimes it's a high-low budget, so they, agree to that range. Other times it's just sort of like a not to exceed, but we always show them that freight is going to be 20% of that whole job. So, moving forward, as we bill for that individual freight, it's coming out of that, whole pot that we've already put in front of them. So it seems to be not quite as shocking, and then it also kind of balances out a little bit. If something's coming from overseas, it's obviously going to be pretty expensive, but then something's, maybe more local, or if it's like being made locally at an upholstery workroom, it's, not going to really have any freight. That will go into more of like a pickup, receiving, delivery, install, which again is something we budget for completely separate from the freight. And we're also marking up those numbers. So if we're getting a freight bill from the vendor that's, $500, and that contract is for 35% markup, we're also marking up the freight to 35%. And we also tend to, because if you're shipping, 8 chairs and 1 dining table and all the things together are equaling $5,000, we don't necessarily break that up and tell them it was $100 for this chair, $100 for that chair. It's being put into just one line item. And so we tend to try to just show at the bottom of the proposal what the total number is, so that they don't kind of question wait, why is this one thing $1,000? And we're like, well, really it's for 8 items. So sort of hiding the individual line item freight cost has been helpful for us, and just giving them the total at the bottom. And it ends up working out pretty much in the end to what we've estimated.
We could also talk about flat freight, right, in terms of putting into your contract a percentage number that works within your firm, and billing a 10 to 20% on every single item, regardless of what the vendor charges you. So therefore, the client has that expectation ahead of time, it's in their contract, and then on every single proposal that you send out, you're collecting that money ahead of time anyway, and then freight is really no longer a negotiation and sort of a hassle sometimes to collect on. Do you see a percentage that often in the work that with the clients?
I mean, you say 20%, which
I do
think
say
is high.
20%. 20% is high.
But I do think there's a win and a lose sometimes, right?
Yes.
Some things that are going to be very expensive to ship, you may lose on that percentage, but then you'll make it up on others. So it's sort of on an average. But I think somewhere between 12 and 15 is closer to what's probably more typical.
I should say that we do manage that percentage on a per project basis, so it's not always 20%. We sort of evaluate, where are we buying from? Are we reusing a lot of pieces that are existing in their home, and then we're just having them reupholstered? So we definitely change that on a per project basis. But again, we're giving that figure at the budgeting stage.
Oh, go ahead. No, I was actually going to ask you.
So I think also something that I've seen that I really like, and I know Kaitlyn's firm does this, is to tell the client when you're billing them something. A lot of times with like international vendors, Europe for argument's sake, is to bill the client for the product, but proactively say to them, the freight bill will be coming, so that they know that you're gonna go back to them for the difference. Because if you're not comfortable using a flat percentage, then you know as the actuals come in, which sometimes is months after the original pieces have been billed, if you're able to tell your client in advance, this is not your final price, we will circle back, I think that sort of softens the blow when you get to the end of a project and your client is tired. They're tired of paying, they've been living in a construction site, or maybe they're 3 months behind their move-in, that they know that some more freight bills are going to come in. And so something that's sometimes helpful to say to them is, I'm sorry, I don't have a freight price for you right now. We have a couple of really strong relationships, and I'm working with my vendors to see who can get you the best price. And this way, the delay isn't, you don't have their information, you're working hard to save them as much money as you can.
All of our proposals do say that freight is estimated, so even if you do provide them a freight cost and then it changes, because we all know that happens, you know, it says it right on our proposal, so we don't have to, you know, talk about it later.
Yeah, we typically...
You're still going to talk about it.
You will still talk about it. We typically suggest, no matter how you're sending out billing to clients, that there should be some fine print in the bottom to keep everybody on the same page. I've seen some really great verbiage about leather hides. As we all know, they don't, your CFA is never going to match your hide that shows up. There's no two cows the same. But any sort of thing that your client is going to push back on after the fact. So if you're if you're a firm who is passing on extra discounts and price increases, to put something along the lines of the fact that all pricing is subject to change, and those changes, increases or decreases, will be passed along. Subject and sales tax and freight is subject to change. No one reads it, but at least they're probably signing your proposals, and then something really cute at the bottom that says payment of this proposal is acceptance of these items as they're listed. Everybody has inventory for a reason, so the likelihood is if that nightstand shows up and your client doesn't like it, you're gonna take it back, but at least you're doing everything you can up front and, again, proactively communicating.
So related to freight is also working with receivers. So how do you manage their costs and just presentation of billing terms and things along those lines with your clients?
So we do work with several different warehouses, depending on the size of the project, sometimes the value of the goods. But we always mark up their cost as well, and you know, the contract is through us versus direct to the client. And sorry, what was the rest of the question? I'm sorry.
Well, just about managing relationships with receivers and how you structure
right,
it.
right.
And costs,
Yeah.
right?
And
So everybody
costs, yeah.
works, I've found that everybody works incredibly different, and you know, they're not going to change for you, so you have to change for them. So figuring out like what is going to work, to, you know, what information do you need from me to make sure that the correct items, you know, get on the truck and get to the installation site. You know, I've built a bunch of different reports that I make sure have like the image, you know, the PO number, the tracking number, like anything that could possibly be on the outside of the box and help them when they're going through the warehouse and trying to pull things to put onto their truck that day. I also utilize the date fields a lot, especially if there's like a multi-day install. You know, I can put like a date in the future of when I want that item delivered, and then I can sort by everything on that date and give them individual reports for each day so that I can really make sure that the right products are showing up.
Isn't that your dream, to become a receiver?
Yes, it is. With a few $1 million, and I want that receiver to talk to Studio and scan, right, and have the dates automatically filter and then spit out a very pretty report with an image.
Dream big.
We're working on that.
We've been working on that for years, you and I.
So I think it is a question, and in my experience recently, I'm seeing more and more that design firms are having the client contract directly with the receiving warehouse. And so I think that that's sort of a double-edged sword, right? It does take some liability off of you as the firm. And it also removes you from the billing for that receiving, which can be a point of contention with clients, again, when there's payment fatigue, right? And we're getting to the end of the project before it installs. But the flip side of letting your client contract directly with a receiving warehouse is that you are losing out on a markup opportunity. And I feel strongly that if you are dealing with the receiving warehouse and if you are the middleman for the payments, that it should be marked up, because if you can't make money on it, it's not worth it for it to be a part of your day.
Yeah, and typically too, like if the design firm is holding the contract with the receiver, obviously the markup is stated in your contract, but we definitely see receiving warehouses marked up the typical client contract. So if your client contract goes out at 35%, a receiving warehouse is marked up 35% as well, because there's such a large administrative component associated with it. Is that what you see too? Do you?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much.
And then who holds the insurance is another, I think, another big question.
Yeah, I was going to say that as well, because we tend to, upfront, before they've received anything, we explain it to our client. We say you can make sure that you're adding these items to your homeowner's insurance policy as they come in, or you can actually get insurance through the warehouse so that they, as a separate policy. And generally, I think most people choose to add it to their homeowner's insurance. But what that means is that I need to make sure to be giving them updated reports so that they know what the value of the goods is that's currently, in the storage.
And again, if you're working with a really great software, right, that information should be able to be extrapolated very, very, very easily.
One area, it's not about receiving or freight, is taxes, and that there are a lot of firms that have gotten in trouble because they're delivering product to a state that they're not actually reporting. And states like Florida will actually follow moving vans around to see what's on the moving van and then hit them up with taxes, and they will go back to your books. We had one client that basically had a liability of $3 million in unpaid taxes from states that they were delivering product to.
Well, ever since, and I know we have to wrap it up, but ever since Wayfair sued South Dakota, right? I mean, that's been a game changer in this industry, and with Amazon.
I think we're going to stop there. Thank you for the wonderful questions, and thank you for being such an engaged and active audience. We will be, again, around. Just make a little left out of here and head to the Designers Lounge. Come have a quick drink and say hi. And thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it.